The grassroots coalition to protect voting rights in this country is growing stronger and bigger, seemingly by the day. The latest institution to join the fight, the American legal community, more than this addition to an effort that has exploded well beyond Georgia into states considering similar voter restriction laws. In Michigan today, for instance, 38 of that state's most prominent business leaders, including the CEOs of both Ford and GM, signed a letter addressed to state lawmakers urging them not to pass legislation that would restrict access to casting ballots. It is more proof that this has become a united national effort. It includes major corporations, along with black business leaders, voices from Hollywood and sports, particularly Major League Baseball. And on that note, actually, proponents of stricter voting measures today are taking out their frustrations on MLB. Senators Cruz, Hawley, and Lee, three supporters of Donald Trump's big lie, as it were, announced a bill that would end the league's antitrust exemption. It's clear punishment for baseball's decision to move this summer's All-Star game out of Atlanta. Joining our conversation is marketing and branding expert Donnie Deutsch. Michael Steele still here. Donnie Deutsch, you proved to be right. I was skeptical that the business community had sort of the steel in the spine for a fight with Republicans, but it appears as of today that they do.
Hey guys, great to see you, Nicole. Professor Steele, always great to be here. Look, if they're looking at a 5-year business plan, here's what they're looking at in their businesses. They're looking at by the year 2021. Do I look foggy? Something wrong? Or is it just my
A little bit. You want to wipe your...
Okay.
You look a little foggy. Yeah. Give it a little wipe.
All right, well, it's just a little wipe here, okay?
Live TV in the time of Zoom. There we go. All right.
You know, they're looking at 5 years. They're looking at 5 years. Nicole, I'm sorry, you have such a great show, and I always come on, and it goes off the rails a little bit. You know, you got serious people like Professor Steele on. And I just take it off track.
Trying to figure out how he looks.
We're all trying to wipe our Zoom screen, Donnie. You're all of us today.
I got a lot more to wipe the Zooms in my life, but we're looking at 5-year plans, and they see in their plans that by the year 2027, half of this country, half of the voting populace is either going to be Gen Zs or millennials. They're also seeing that only 3 out of 10 voters are going to be born before the year 1964. And so they understand this is the world. And Nicole, I talked about this last week, and this is where it is. This is where what I can't figure out the Republicans is they lose on the numbers. It's not there anymore. It's not even right or wrong anymore. And I do believe most CEOs are in the right places. It's just you're going to lose from a business point. And this is why the businesses are doing it. And, you know, these law firms that came aboard, these are not some left-wing. This is Paul Weiss. This is Rockefeller Lipton. These are the most traditional, conservative, white shoe law firms. It's not William Kunstler in the 70s. You know, these are as establishment as you can be. So when I see those 3 stooges, when I see Lee, when I see Hawley, when I see Cruz standing up there, they literally are stooges. They could not be more tone deaf to the reality of where the voting populace is. One final fact. 1 out of 3 millennials will say they would take a pay cut to work for a company that shares their values. Think about that. That's where the world is going, and
that's
Republicans
incredible.
are told that.
Well, and I guess, Michael Steele, I'll come at it with you from another perspective, and no, you were not foggy. Now that we'll give everyone a screen test here. How do Republicans live without... Were they going to go to war with every corporation that's against a voter suppression law?
Well, yeah, if that's tactically what they think will gain them opportunities with the base and perpetuate the cultural war narrative to some extent. That's what you saw displayed today. You know, ask yourselves, where were you a year ago? What's the difference between a year ago and now? What's the difference in the 2018 cycle? When you had allegations in the Georgia governor's race of fraud and corruption, you weren't jumping on the bandwagon of looking into what was going on in Georgia there and responding at that point because the Republican governor won. That's right. Okay, I get it. So that's the reality here. This is no more than a display of noise. And you know, 2 of those 3 gentlemen have ambitions to become the next president of the United States, but they got to go through Donald Trump first And of course, this helps navigate them through that space to perpetuate the big lie in the face of what the Supreme Court, 60 federal courts, the former Attorney General of the United States, and the Secretary of State in the state in which you're trying to bring this action said there was no fraud, there was no corruption, there was no illegality. So what is the purpose of this? Oh, you're going after a business that's standing up on the side of voters as opposed to standing with you and perpetuating the big lie.
Well, I take your point about them wanting to run for president, but they're going to have to become overnight advocates of public financing of campaigns because no one's going to give them any money. I'm going to ask both of you to stick around. We have to take a quick break. More Donnie Deutsch and Michael Steele on the other side. Don't go anywhere. We're back with Michael Steele and Donnie Deutsch. Donnie, my question for you about sort of the corporate America's appetite for a real political fight is about the field on which this is being waged. And if I retain one sort of piece of muscle memory from my time working in Republican politics, is that they don't fight on defense. They'll try to get themselves back on offense. Is corporate America ready to be part of the offense here? Because the best way to fight voter suppression laws isn't to fight the voter suppression legislation 2 days before it becomes law. It's to get behind voter access laws, to try to make absentee voting available in more states, to try to make early voting. I mean, are they ready to get on offense around voting rights?
Depends on the companies. You have certain companies like Levi Strauss, their CEO has been very, forward and whatnot. Where the offense is going to come from, you have Hewlett Packard, you have Apple, you have Tesla. We're opening up new facilities in Texas, for instance. So we know the next battle is Texas. Pull them out. There's only so much of just saying is going to do it. The offense to them is making statements like Major League Baseball, you don't get our business. It's over at that point. They win. So that their offense is play in your own world. They can take their headquarters. They can go to any cities that they want, just like the All-Star Game, go anywhere they want. What's going to make it work is the dollars. And those are the brave ones. So right now, last year, out of 500 S&P companies, 370 put out statements about racial equality. I want to know what the other 130 would do. It's going to take more than statements at this point. They're going to have to do it with their pocketbook, period.
Yeah.
And Michael Steele, I guess my question for you is, I think the good news here, because the conversations about sort of the lack of principles and core, even from former Speaker Boehner, who can be lovable in media appearances, is that there is no core on the right. And if you could have a powerful coalition that goes on offense, not just against the suppression laws, but to create access, you really can change the equation.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think Donnie's put it absolutely in the right box in terms of how that activism will materialize itself as we're beginning to see it form, is by saying, look, you just don't get our business. We are corporate citizens. Now that's been defined by the Supreme Court. And so your Supreme Court, by the way, conservatives, and so you love us when you got the full reins under the law to take our money, but then you want us to be silent on the things that matter to our employees and our customers, because at the end of the day, there are more of them than there are of you. Oh, and by the way, some of our customers and employees are Republicans too. So it becomes a very dynamic space for these companies to engage on these big issues. Because at the end of the day, all the RNC wants and McConnell and Hawley and others is stroke us the check, but keep your mouth shut. Now the company is saying, well, before you get my check, I have something to say. And that's a different space.
It is amazing, and if I would never have predicted we'd be covering the GOP as hostile to businesses in 2021. Donnie Deutsch, Michael Steele, thank you both so much for spending some time with us today. When we return, as we do every day, we will remember lives well lived.
I watched the months leading up to the election when the president continued to tell the American people that the election was going to be stolen. And then we got to Election Day, and frankly, it was closer than most anybody thought. But the president then went on to say the election was being stolen, and but never put any evidence out there. And it went on for months. And frankly, I think the president abused the loyalty and trust of the people who voted for him by spewing that nonsense without ever putting any facts out there.
That was former House Speaker John Boehner blasting, really going after Donald Trump's push to overturn the election results. The campaign that, as Boehner notes, began way before Election Day, like months before the election, with Trump telling all of his supporters without any basis in fact that the election would be stolen from him if he lost. But despite that shameless and baseless attempt to undermine our democracy, guess who Boehner voted for? Donald Trump. He told Time magazine, quote, "I thought that his policies by and large mirrored the policies that I believed in. I thought the choices for the Supreme Court were top notch." Another Trump critic who can't seem to quit Donald Trump, Nikki Haley, who now says she'll stand down on a presidential bid and support Trump if he runs in 2024. Here's what she told Politico back in February in the wake of the Capitol insurrection, quote, "We need to acknowledge he let us down. He went down a path he shouldn't have, and we shouldn't have followed him. And we shouldn't have listened to him, and we can't ever let that happen again." Joining our conversation, former RNC chairman and MSNBC contributor Michael Steele. Nick Confessori's here, New York Times political and investigative reporter and MSNBC political analyst. I used to watch Dexter, Michael Steele, and it was like, he'd be such a good boyfriend if he wasn't a killer. I mean, this is the sickness of the Republican Party. The sickness actually isn't anyone with the last name Trump. The sickness is John Boehner, who's like, well, yeah, I liked his positions on regulation, so I voted for an insurrectionist, liar, corrupt guy who was suspiciously cozy with Vladimir Putin. The Republican Party cannot be fixed with people like John Boehner voting for Donald Trump in 2020.
Yeah, that's the reality and the truth of it. How do you say, I like the policy, but the character of the man, the quality of his leadership, how he's helped us or not helped us through these tough times with COVID, that's secondary to the policy. And John Boehner went on to say, well, I voted for the party and not the man. Well, the party is the man. He made that very clear. Nikki Haley, same thing. I mean, you can't sit there and say he let us down, but if he runs again, I'll just stand down. Well, okay, so what does that say about your leadership? And that's the new frontier for a lot of these Republicans is how do you express your leadership in the face of Donald Trump? Is it still putting forward the face of Trump, or do you put forth your own and ask the party and the country to trust your judgment as opposed to trusting your judgment in Trump?
How does the party lay any claim to the mantle of strong leadership when they're so pathetically weak? They're hostages to the guy who incited an insurrection, in the words of Liz Cheney.
Well, they're not only hostages to the guy who incited the riot, they're hostile to the folks who are standing up and saying, dude, that's not what you want to do. That's not where you want to go. You don't want to follow him. Danger, Will Robinson, danger. You don't want to do that. So they shut down that narrative as quickly as they can because they don't want to confront that truth about themselves, Nicole, that they have capitulated, that they have given in. It's one thing to rail against Trump after the fact. We still remember what you said at the moment. We still remember what you did in the moment. We understand what you said and did in the face of January 6th. It's like McConnell, giving that great speech after he voted to acquit the guy. Well, you don't acquit the guy and then go, yeah he actually did it.
Yeah. I mean, and Nick Confessori, it's also, I think, a warning shot to all of us in the media who cover Republicans willing to say one, critical thing of he who incited an insurrection and his supporters to, quote, hang Mike Pence. Boehner's on a publicity tour to sell a book. He said some critical things about Jim Jordan and Ted Cruz, but pretty revealing in that Morning Joe interview that Time magazine reported, that he did indeed vote for Donald Trump. And that was after months and months of perpetuating a big lie that if he were to lose, it would be because there was fraud or because Joe Biden cheated.
Look, I think Speaker Boehner is being painfully honest here. He's saying, I'm not a huge fan of insurrection, but I love his Supreme Court picks. And that's essentially the deal that most Republicans have made with former President Trump, that they got what they wanted out of him, what they needed. They got control of the federal courts for a generation. They got some deregulation. They got a huge corporate tax cut. And I think in their minds, it was worth it. And as you point out, it was clear on Election Day when Speaker Boehner cast his ballot what was happening with President Trump. He had spent months sowing destabilizing lies and conspiracy theories about the election. He judged it was worth it. We should have more of this man in the White House. That's the deal. And I think, look, President Trump is holding his party hostage, basically. And they can't win with him, and they can't win without him. He's their best fundraiser. He's their most revered elder statesman. He is raising a huge amount of money into his PAC, and he wants a role in picking their Senate candidates. And he's going to be the kingmaker as long as they allow him to be.
You know, Michael Steele, I never like turning this back onto Democrats because they are the only party interested in governing from a place of principle and public service. President Biden is trying to cure COVID for everybody. He's not asking party registration before he jabs anybody. But is there something about the transactional nature of Republicans that they could sort of jiu-jitsu and use to their own advantages? I mean, is there something to be taken of just how shallow and transactional GOP support is in the modern age?
Well, no, I think that's a very good point. And a lot of that is baked into the calculation that Nick just laid out in terms of how the party looks at this. And they figure, look, here's the bottom line. What are the consequences? What are the consequences? All right, so yeah, we lost the presidency, but what did we hear after they lost the presidency? Well, it was Donald Trump. It wasn't us, right? They voted against Trump and not against us because we picked up seats in the House. We kept the Senate close, and yeah, we lost it, but we really do still have some control. And the thinking going into next cycle is we'll get them both back. And it is based on that calculation, how the voters receive this and perceive that at the end of the day, they still believe that there are more people who are going to align themselves with what they're saying in the Trump orbit than what they see in the Biden orbit, which is why they continue with the socialism narrative, which is why they continue with, well, we're not going to cooperate and work with him because they don't want to see that ground. And this is the sticking point that I think becomes more difficult in the next cycle. Biden has established success on COVID. He's lining up the narrative on infrastructure, and voters are liking that. They like what they hear. So then how do you reconcile that if people have their shots, the economy's back open, and guess what? My construction company is now back doing, shovel-ready jobs to help rebuild the economy. Oh, and the Republicans' message is, well, that's socialism, vote for us. I think that becomes a hard thing to sell, but that's the calculation right now.
Yeah, I mean, but Nick, to turn it back onto the shallowness of the Republican argument, I mean, a shot in the arm and your business being back open with people in your restaurant eating indoors and outdoors as a result of a vaccinated population. Socialism is abstract. It's an attack line that people can attach much to. But if you own a restaurant, your restaurant being open, if you own a daycare being full of kids whose parents are back going to offices and community work, I mean, there are tangible sort of real results in people's lives, regardless of their party affiliation. I mean, the Biden administration couldn't target their policies for the people that voted for him if they wanted to. So it makes the way the former president governs seem ludicrous, where he didn't want to do anything for anyone who didn't vote for him.
I mean, it's amazing when you think about it. If President Trump had done an actual infrastructure bill like he said he was going to do over and over again, I think he might still be president. He had these moments. And what you see with President Biden is his first two big things out of the box are pretty straightforward. They have some things Republicans don't like in the Congress, but they're broadly supported by the public. He's not doing, edgy things so far, right? It's COVID response and infrastructure, however you define it. And that, look, I think that is it's good policy and good politics from their perspective. And as you point out, we're going to be entering, hopefully, a new phase in American life after a really tortured and terrible year. And Joe Biden is going to be at the front of that train, if so.
Nick Convasori, thank you so much for spending some time with us. Michael Steele is sticking around a little longer. When we return, the pressure campaign against Republican consultation with partners in the civil rights community. The administration made the considered judgment that a police commission at this time would not be the most effective way to deliver on our top priority in this area, which is to sign the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act into law. What has to happen for this to pass and for the president to be able to sign it into law?
We need to put this before the Senate. It has gone before the House. It has passed. We start our National Action Network convention here in New York tomorrow morning. It's a virtual convention. Attorney General Garland and many people in the president's cabinet are going to speak virtually. We've invited the president. We need the law passed. And if we cannot get enough Republicans, then we need to get rid of the filibuster. It's already passed the House. Schumer needs to bring it to the Senate, and if they will not pass it with 60 votes, then we need to kill the filibuster or find a way to go around it. But we need to make law. How did we deal with Jim Crow, Nicole? How did we go from the back of the bus? It wasn't the riots. It wasn't even just the marches. It was the marches and all led to the 64 Civil Rights Act, and it became against federal law to tell us we had to sit in back of the bus. It didn't matter what the state of Alabama said. It was federal law. It was federal law that we could check in hotels. How do we deal with policing? We need federal law. This is not hard. This is what we've done before with any civil rights abuse. This is what we need to do now. And let's stop acting like we don't know how to do it. It's the law, and every state would have to abide by federal law. It's right there in front of the Senate. We have a majority in the Senate if we just do a majority vote 50-50 with Vice President Harris breaking the tie. This doesn't take rocket science. It takes some courage to seize the time.
Well, and Eddie Glaude, let's also not pretend like we don't understand what is standing between the Biden agenda getting passed and not. What do you think should happen immediately to let the federal legislation that would represent just monumental change in the legislative structure around police conduct?
Well, pressure has to be brought on Joe Manchin, Christian Sinema, those who are within the Democratic Party who hold a particular conception of policing that we think is problematic. We need to bring pressure to bear so that the rules of the Senate can be, adjusted with regards to the filibuster in this instance, Nicole, if I understand the question correctly, so that we can do exactly what Reverend Sharpton has said. I think we need to just pan back for a quick second. Think about the very framework of 20th century policing in this country. When we think about how black communities have been policed in the early part of the 20th century, defined by a society that actually viewed black folk as second-class citizens. Our communities were supposed to be surveilled and contained. Think about how that then transitioned into a discourse of law and order, where even if you read the Kerner Commission report, Nicole, there's a sense in which we are policed and surveilled and contained. Then that bleeds into the war on drugs, and how that then devastates our community. In each instance, a form of policing isn't to serve and protect, it's to police, it's to surveil, it's to contain, it's to incarcerate, it's to view black communities as threat. So there's the political and legislative piece that we're talking about, that Reverend Al has been hitting hard, that you're asking the right questions. But if we don't change the framing of policing, we're going to have to bury another Dante Wright. Parents are going to have to worry about their babies. See, this is the thing. We have to honestly confront who we are. Policing in this country is rooted deeply in racist presuppositions about the criminality of black and brown folk. And until we honestly admit that, right, we can't make moves in these other ways. Now, let's just say that at the end of the day, and I'm talking too much here, at the end of the day, it will require adjusting the filibuster and pushing Manchin and Sinema and others into a corner and asking them to make a choice with regards to this issue, Nicole.
Well, I need you to talk more. I mean, why is that where we are? Why are we satisfied to say one of the two major political parties is so racist that they're not even available to us? We need to pressure Joe Manchin to change the filibuster. Is that where we are, Eddie?
I think so. Look, we have to I've been saying this for a long time. We have to be honest with ourselves. There's a political party in our country that's beholden to a certain set of insidious views about who belongs and who do not belong, right? We need to be clear about that. And then there are those of us who are kind of trying to be moderates, who think we can work with those who hold that view. There is no compromise, Nicole, if the polity will be saved. There's no compromise with those who believe that America belongs only to white people. If they believe that, they seal the fate of the country. We have to finally admit that, I think.
Ashley Parker, I wasn't going to share this or bring him into this, but to Eddie's point, the last guy's response was, quote, "When the looting starts, the shooting starts." What does this White House feel is the priority when we have this aching sameness of another tragic death of a young black man, a father, who died at the hands of a police officer who the news accounts and the reporting so far, she's resigned, so has the police chief there, is that she reached for her gun instead of her taser. What does the Biden White House want to feel different and look different today than when this happened on the former guy's watch?
Well, you see just the sheer difference in tone in what the president and the vice president have said. They have not sort of come out blindly on the side of the police as former President Trump generally did. They both said that this latest death was senseless and unacceptable. And I would also note that President Biden in general, when he came into office, he identified 4 major crises, and racial inequity was one of them. And that includes what we're discussing right now and so much more. That said, when you look at the 4 crises he's identified, some of them have very clear metrics and benchmarks. On COVID, the president can say, we wanted to do 100 million shots in arms in the first 100 days. And we did that. We have this benchmark to reopen schools. When it comes to this racial inequity, component, the benchmarks are a lot less clear, and there's a lot less tangible successes for this president to point to. So it's certainly something his administration cares about, that he is passionate about. He has used, the same phrases the Reverend used to describe Jim Crow, to describe the Georgia voting law that's restrictive. But again, he hasn't been able to stand up there yet and point to these really specific, tangible changes, which we can see just this week as we are bearing witness to yet another crisis and another tragedy in our nation.
Ashley, what he has, though, is a record now of showing his capacity to garner broad swaths of support among not just Democratic Americans, but Republicans. And let me just read for our viewers what is in the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. It prohibits law enforcement from racial, religious, and discriminatory profiling. It bans chokeholds at the federal level. It bans no-knock warrants. It requires federal uniformed officers to wear body cameras. It creates a nationwide police misconduct registry, and it ends qualified immunity. There is nothing radical in there. There's nothing far left in there. These are, dare I say, and I hope you don't, these are sort of consensus measures. Do you think they'll use what is a proven track record of garnering broad swaths of public support around the COVID relief plan? They're using it now around infrastructure to garner broad public support around those fixes?
He certainly hopes to. And the advantage he has is that in addition to caring passionately about this issue and sort of being well positioned for it, he is an empathizer in chief, as we saw today at the funeral or the memorial in the Capitol. There's something almost pastoral about him. His other advantage in talking to some people in his orbit is that he is a white male. He is, an almost 80-year-old white guy from a working class background. And if there is anyone who can bring the country together and not be sort of portrayed or villainized as radical or out of touch, it is someone like Joe Biden. And that will be another one of the strengths he will be pulling on to make some real changes, try to make some real changes.
And another thing, Rev, that he did was I know you were very involved in his picks at the Justice Department. Let me show you what the new Attorney General Merrick Garland said about the mission of the Department's Civil Rights Division.
That mission on the website of the Department's Civil Rights Division remains urgent because we do not yet have equal justice. Communities of color and other minorities still face discrimination in housing, in education, in employment, and in the criminal justice system. And they bear the brunt of the harm caused by pandemic, pollution, and climate change.
So, Rev, I guess I want to come back to you on how the pieces are in place to have a real difference from the last 4 years. But I wonder if today you feel optimistic or not.
I feel today that we are at a place that we need to make a move. And I think Joe Biden is the person that can do it. He has the ability. The fact that he's a white male, the fact he has a sensitivity. I was in the room when he met with George Floyd's family when he was running for president, and some said, don't go do that. He went the day before the funeral. He has a sensitivity, and he has the knowledge, and he has people like Judge Garland, like those that are being brought into the Justice Department, like Gupta and like Christian Clark. They need to be able to use all their wherewithal. When I was a kid, Lyndon Johnson was at the same place, and he had the same setup. And Lyndon Johnson was able to pass the Civil Rights Act and Voting Rights Act because people pushed the administration. We're going to push, and I think we're pushing people that will get it, but we've got to do our side. Martin Luther King said there are two types of leaders. There are thermometers and there are thermostats. Thermometers judge the temperature. Thermostats change the temperature. I come out the thermostat tradition. I'm going to stay with the Wrights families and the Floyd families until we get the temperature of this country so to everybody understands we need justice equally, not favors, just justice.
Ashley Parker, Eddie Glaude, the Reverend Al Sharpton, I thank all three of you so much for starting us off this hour and having that conversation. Thank you. When we return, the shocking